Fire Captain Engineering, situation critical.
All available personnel on the double. Spock with me.
Before superheroes dominated theaters and long before fandoms lived online 24 hours a day, one television series quietly changed science fiction forever. In 1966, a low-budget show about a starship exploring the galaxy premiered on NBC and barely survived. Ratings were shaky. Executives doubted it. Critics were confused by it. Yet somehow, against every expectation, Star Trek became one of the most influential television franchises in history. But behind the bridge of the USS Enterprise were strange production secrets, bizarre accidents, hidden truths, and creative decisions fans never fully realized. These are 20 weird facts about Star Trek that most fans never figured out. Number 1. Captain Kirk wasn't the original hero. When creator Gene Roddenberry first imagined the Enterprise, the captain wasn't James T. Kirk. In fact, Kirk didn't even exist in the original pilot. The lead character was Captain Christopher Pike, played by Jeffrey Hunter. Pike was serious, restrained, intellectual, and calm under pressure. Roddenberry believed television audiences would connect with a more philosophical commander instead of an action hero. NBC executives initially liked Hunter because he already had Hollywood credibility from films like King of Kings. But after filming the first pilot, Hunter unexpectedly left the project. Some reports claimed his wife thought television was beneath him. Others suggested he simply didn't believe the show would succeed. Whatever the reason, his departure completely transformed the direction of the series. That's when William Shatner entered the picture. Unlike Hunter, Shatner brought swagger, unpredictability, and theatrical energy. The moment he stepped onto the bridge as Captain Kirk, the entire atmosphere of the show changed. Instead of a cold, cerebral drama, Star Trek suddenly had charisma and intensity. Ironically, the accidental replacement may have saved the franchise. Number 2. Spock nearly looked terrifying. Today, Spock is one of the most beloved characters in television history. But early versions of the character looked almost demonic. Roddenberry's first design notes described Spock with reddish skin and far more alien facial features. The intention was to make him feel unsettling and mysterious, almost like a devil from folklore. The problem was technology. In 1966, most Americans still watched television in black and white. Makeup artists discovered the red skin would appear extremely dark on monochrome televisions, giving Spock an unintentionally sinister appearance. Producers worried audiences might reject the character entirely, so the makeup team redesigned him with subtle yellow-green undertones instead. Combined with the pointed ears and sharply angled eyebrows, the final version looked alien without appearing monstrous. Ironically, the makeup was so subtle in color broadcast that many viewers never even realized Spock's skin wasn't normal human tone. Even stranger, the famous Vulcan salute almost never existed either. Leonard Nimoy created it himself, inspired by a Jewish religious blessing he remembered from childhood. One spontaneous hand gesture became one of the most recognized symbols in pop culture history. Number 3. The transporter was created because the show was broke. One of Star Trek's most revolutionary inventions was never meant to exist. The transporter, the iconic beam-me-up device, was invented for one simple reason. The production team couldn't afford spaceships landing every episode. Originally, the crew was supposed to use shuttlecraft whenever they traveled to planets. But filming miniature landing sequences every week would have destroyed the show's budget. The producers needed something cheaper and faster. The solution was brilliant improvisation. Instead of expensive landing scenes, the crew would simply disappear in sparkles of light and reappear elsewhere. The transporter effect itself was created using glitter, backlighting, and reversed film footage. It cost almost nothing compared to elaborate spaceship sequences. What began as a budget shortcut accidentally became one of the defining ideas of science fiction. Today, scientists still debate whether teleportation could theoretically exist. Entire research papers reference concepts similar to Star Trek transporters. One of television's greatest inventions was born from financial desperation. Number 4. NBC hated the first pilot. Most television shows get one chance to impress a network. Star Trek got two, something almost unheard of in the 1960s. The first pilot episode, The Cage, was rejected by NBC executives who described it as too cerebral and too intellectual. They thought audiences would find it slow and confusing. Executives were also uncomfortable with the show's female first officer, known only as Number One, played by Majel Barrett. Instead of canceling the project completely, NBC made a rare decision. They ordered a second pilot. Roddenberry reworked the series almost entirely. Captain Pike became Kirk. Number One disappeared. The tone became more adventurous and action-oriented. But Roddenberry later recycled footage from The Cage into the two-part episode The Menagerie. Amazingly, the rejected pilot eventually became part of one of the most respected stories in the franchise. Number 5. Martin Luther King Jr. saved Uhura's role. During the 1960s, seeing a black woman portrayed as a respected communications officer on television was groundbreaking. Nichelle Nichols understood the importance of Lieutenant Uhura, but after the first season, she planned to quit the show for a Broadway opportunity. Then something extraordinary happened. At an NAACP event, Martin Luther King Jr. personally approached Nichols and told her she could not leave Star Trek. He explained that Uhura represented a future where Black Americans existed as equals, educated, respected, and essential. He said millions of children were seeing themselves differently because of her role. Nichols later admitted she withdrew her resignation immediately after that conversation. Without Martin Luther King Jr., one of Star Trek's most historic characters might have disappeared after a single season. Number 6. Leonard Nimoy initially hated being Spock. Although Spock became legendary, Leonard Nimoy struggled deeply with the role in the beginning. He worried the pointed ears and alien makeup would reduce him to a joke. He feared audiences would see Spock as a monster rather than a serious character. Even more difficult was the emotional restraint. Nimoy had trained as a dramatic actor, and suddenly he was being asked to suppress nearly every emotional instinct he had. Spock's calm logic required Nimoy to completely reinvent his performance style. For a long time, he felt trapped by the role. Years later, he even titled his autobiography I Am Not Spock, reflecting his frustration with being permanently associated with the character. But, eventually, after seeing how deeply audiences connected with Spock, Nimoy embraced the legacy and released a second autobiography called I Am Spock. That evolution perfectly captured his complicated relationship with the role that made him famous. Number 7. The famous kiss nearly got censored. In 1968, Star Trek aired one of television's most controversial moments, a kiss between Captain Kirk and Uhura. It is widely remembered as one of the first interracial kisses on American primetime television. NBC executives were terrified. Southern affiliates worried viewers would react negatively, so the network demanded changes to the script. Producers added a plot device where aliens mentally forced Kirk and Uhura to kiss, allowing NBC to claim it wasn't voluntary romance. But behind the scenes, Shatner and Nichols reportedly sabotaged alternate takes that avoided the kiss. They intentionally ruined safer versions of the scene so the network would be forced to use the original footage. The moment aired anyway, and television history changed forever. Number 8. Fans saved the show from cancellation. Star Trek was never a ratings giant during its original run. By the second season, NBC seriously considered canceling it. But something unprecedented happened. Fans organized massive letter-writing campaigns. Remember, this was decades before social media or the internet. Fans physically mailed letters to NBC by the hundreds of thousands. College students organized petitions. Supporters protested outside network offices. The campaign worked. NBC renewed the show for a third season largely because of fan pressure. It was one of the earliest examples in television history of audiences successfully influencing a network decision. Ironically, that weak third season later became essential because it pushed Star Trek past the episode threshold needed for syndication, the very thing that eventually turned it into a global phenomenon. Number 9. The Enterprise model was incomplete. The original USS Enterprise filming model looked incredible on camera, but there was a secret hidden underneath it. quite literally underneath. The 11-foot model was only fully detailed on the parts cameras would actually see. The underside remained unfinished in several areas because producers assumed viewers would never notice. This wasn't laziness. It was survival. Every dollar mattered, and finishing invisible sections of the ship would have wasted precious money. Today, the original Enterprise model sits in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, where fans can finally see details television audiences were never meant to inspect closely. Number 10. Beam me up, Scotty was never said. One of the most famous quotes in entertainment history does not actually exist. Throughout the original series, Kirk says variations like Scotty, beam us up or beam me up. But the exact phrase beam me up, Scotty is never spoken once in the show. Over time, pop culture fused the words together into a single iconic phrase that somehow became more famous than any actual line from the series. It's one of the greatest examples of collective false memory in entertainment history. Number 11. Alien costumes came from old westerns. Star Trek looked futuristic, but many costumes came from entirely different genres. The wardrobe department constantly recycled outfits from old studio productions to save money. Ancient Roman robes became alien ceremonial clothing. Old Western costumes were modified into futuristic uniforms. Medieval armor was repainted into sci-fi battle gear. If viewers looked carefully, they sometimes recognized pieces from completely unrelated television shows and movies. The costume department became masters of illusion, transforming old Hollywood leftovers into distant alien civilizations. Number 12. The phasers started as toy guns. The famous Starfleet phasers were partially built from modified toy ray guns already sitting in studio storage. The prop department added extra components, repainted them, and redesigned details to make them appear futuristic. Even then, the props still looked slightly plastic on camera. But clever lighting and sound design helped sell the illusion. The funny part is that decades later, real-world directed energy weapon research began resembling science fiction concepts Star Trek popularized. A cheaply modified television prop ended up influencing actual technological imagination. Number 13. Tribbles became a real hazard. The Trouble with Tribbles became one of the most beloved episodes of the franchise, but filming it was chaos. The Tribbles themselves were furry props filled with foam and small vibrating devices. Under the hot studio lights, their synthetic fur generated enormous amounts of static electricity. Tribbles clung to actors, costumes, cameras, and furniture. Crew members reportedly received constant electric shocks while handling them. Some Tribbles even stuck to equipment so aggressively that filming had to stop repeatedly while workers removed them. The adorable creatures accidentally became tiny electrical hazards. Number 14. Star Trek created the red shirt trope. Today, everyone knows what a red shirt means. The disposable character who dies first during dangerous missions. That term was born directly from Star Trek. Security officers and engineers frequently wore red uniforms, and those background characters had an unfortunate tendency to die during away missions. Over time, audiences subconsciously noticed the pattern. Eventually, red shirt became permanent storytelling vocabulary far beyond science fiction. Writers, critics, and even military analysts now use the term to describe expendable characters or personnel. A costume color accidentally created one of pop culture's most enduring tropes. Number 15. Klingons were not originally the main villains. Most people associate Star Trek villains with Klingons. But in the original series, the Romulans initially felt more important. The Romulans appeared in the classic episode Balance of Terror, where they were portrayed as intelligent, calculating adversaries inspired partly by Cold War tensions. They felt strategic and dangerous. Klingons arrived later and were portrayed more aggressively, almost like brute force military rivals. It wasn't until later films and spin-offs that Klingons became central to the franchise mythology. In the 1960s series itself, the villain landscape was far more balanced than modern fans usually remember. Number 16. Kirk was designed to beat computers. The writers intentionally built Captain Kirk as a symbol of human intuition defeating machine logic. Again and again, The Enterprise computer calculated impossible odds or recommended coldly logical choices. Kirk ignored them, and he won. This wasn't accidental storytelling. Roddenberry wanted Star Trek to argue that humanity's greatest strength was emotional judgment and instinct, qualities machines could never fully replicate. Decades later, during debates about artificial intelligence, automation, and algorithmic decision-making, those same questions suddenly feel surprisingly modern. Number 17. Star Trek secretly smuggled political messages. Underneath the science fiction adventures, Star Trek constantly commented on real-world social issues. Roddenberry used alien worlds as metaphors for racism, war, extremism, and political corruption. Episodes criticized hatred, prejudice, blind nationalism, and violence while hiding those themes inside futuristic stories. This allowed the show to bypass network censorship more easily. One famous example involved two aliens whose faces were black on opposite sides, each hating the other over racial differences that outsiders considered meaningless. The metaphor was obvious, but disguising it as science fiction helped it reach audiences who might otherwise reject the message. Star Trek wasn't just entertainment. It was social commentary disguised as space adventure. Number 18. The cast recorded a strange music album. At one point, the cast participated in bizarre musical recordings that felt almost surreal. William Shatner dramatically performed spoken-word songs with full theatrical intensity, while Leonard Nimoy recorded highly serious, almost poetic performances. Some tracks sounded festive. Others sounded deeply strange. Originally intended as novelty material for fans and promotional use, the recordings eventually became cult collector items. Hearing the cast of Star Trek performing odd musical experiments remains one of the weirdest side stories in franchise history. Number 19. The budget was ridiculously small. Modern science fiction shows spend millions per episode. Star Trek in 1966 survived through pure creativity because the budget was constantly strained. Sets were endlessly reused. Corridors appeared repeatedly as different ships or alien bases with slight modifications. Crew members often appeared as background extras wearing random costumes. Visual effects relied on miniatures, painted backgrounds, lighting tricks, and photographic overlays. Nearly everything audiences saw involved improvisation. Yet somehow, despite the limitations, the universe still felt enormous. That may actually be part of why the series endured. Imagination filled the gaps where money could not. Number 20. The show became famous only after it failed. Here's the strangest fact of all. During its original run, Star Trek was not considered a major success. Ratings were mediocre. NBC remained uncertain about it almost every season. When the series ended in 1969, it looked like another failed television experiment. Then syndication happened. Local stations began airing reruns across America, and younger audiences discovered the show for the first time. College students embraced its ideas. Fan conventions exploded in popularity. The fan base grew larger every single year after cancellation. Eventually, Star Trek transformed from a forgotten sci-fi show into a cultural institution that inspired movies, spin-offs, books, technology, and generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers. That may be the greatest irony in television history. The show that barely survived became immortal after the network gave up on it.